How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Black Metal Rebellion. I'm your host, Jesse Morgan, and guess what time it is? It is time for another Unpopular Metal Opinions video. Since the last one I did, it was like 7 fucking months ago. Strap yourselves in because this is potentially going to rustle some jimmies. Now, this being number 7 in my series, I'm going to be switching the title a little bit. I'm just going to be abbreviating it to just UMO. So if you see this in the future, after watching this video, you'll see that it's no longer Unpopular Metal Opinions. It's going to be UMO and then title. Because I've kind of noticed that the titles are getting a little bit longer, or have been longer, and this one's no exception. It kind of gets cut off when people kind of see the tab or the thumbnail, stuff like that, with the rest of the video. So the title of these episodes are a little bit more important than the fact that they're actually called Unpopular Metal Opinions. So that's going to be a thing that's happening in the future. Next, now, if you haven't read the title already, this one is called Screamo and Groove Metal Aren't Real Music Genres. And I've been meaning to do this for a while. It's kind of been something that I was putting off just because I hadn't got all of the points yet and bands written down, and just kind of thought of how I want to discuss this. It's going to be mostly off the cuff because I don't really have too much written down here on my outline. And this was... I originally had a kind of an issue with the blanket term Screamo, and it's kind of annoying, but since I didn't really listen to too much of that music anymore, I didn't really think it had a place here on Jesse Talks Metal, or the Black Metal Rebellion, or anything like that, or Unpopular Metal Opinions. But then, Banger Television, or Banger TV, which is a little bit more popular kind of metal channel on YouTube here, they did an episode on groove metal, this genre, apparently. But yeah, I'm just like, okay, since Banger Television is now promoting the use of groove metal as a genre, I, being the Rebellion, have to come in and give my 2 cents, because if not, it just wouldn't be a proper Rebellion now, would it? Alright, so anyways, Screamo and groove metal aren't real music genres. Here's why. One, just right off the bat, I feel these are just incredibly lazy, lazy blanket terms to cover music genres that could otherwise be explained a little bit more in depth and with a little bit more thought. People like to throw Screamo as a blanket term for a lot of things that's a mix of emo and metalcore, or stuff that's post-hardcore, or stuff that has a mix of emo and hardcore and stuff like that in it. And I'm finding a lot of people are trying to throw groove metal around for things that have like a mix of doom and hardcore in it, or stuff that could be easily recognized as new metal or alternative metal, or things that have like one of those mixed with a little bit of thrash in it. So they're like, oh, I'm just going to call it groove metal, or oh, I'm just going to call this post-hardcore stuff Screamo. And it's kind of annoying to people like myself and others here on YouTube who are kind of veteran metal listeners, and people who actually play music. Like, I play guitar, I play drums, I do vocals, so I compose different musical types of genres. And as someone who like writes this stuff, I find using simple lazy blanket terms like Screamo and groove metal kind of annoying and kind of insulting, that there's people out there that are just willing to just stop at that, and they're like, well, I don't really feel like researching enough, or I don't feel like delving far enough into this to really, think about what's really being presented to me, to think about what I'm really hearing. I'm just going to call it Screamo, or I'm just going to call it groove metal because it's kind of groovy. Groovy is an adjective to describe a part of the sound that you're hearing. It is not a metal genre. Okay? Now, I kind of went in and grabbed a little bit of samples of bands that people like to blanket with these terms. I'll go over the Screamo ones first, and then I'll go over the fucking groove metal next. Okay, first of all, August Burns Red. August Burns Red gets thrown under the Screamo title a lot. I've seen it on Google, I've seen it on Facebook, I've seen it in Facebook groups, I've seen it thrown up on YouTube. It just, people like to label these guys as Screamo. They're not. August Burns Red is metalcore. It's got the kind of hardcore elements to it, and it's got some metal elements to it, and it's got kind of a blend of these kind of elements with the vocals and the guitaring, the string skipping kind of riffs, and then they have the breakdowns, which is a kind of a hardcore thing to do. So yeah, it's a mix of hardcore and metal. It's metalcore. Another one that I hear a lot being labeled as this, but they're not brought up as much, is the Used. Now, the Used use a lot of elements of emo music in it, but they also use a lot of pop punk elements. They also use a lot of metalcore elements, but for the most part, the Used are what is called post-hardcore, because they do stuff that goes beyond just hardcore, and they also utilize a little bit of metalcore and emo elements. So yeah, the Used isn't Screamo. These guys are mostly post-hardcore. Another band in this, very, very commonly used as Screamo, is Asking Alexandria. Now, regardless of your opinion on this band, I know a lot of people take giant greasy shits on this band. The first album, in my opinion, was not too bad. Second one, and the most recent one was actually tolerable for my music preferences. That being aside, they're not Screamo. Okay, these guys are basically in the same category as the Used. These guys are post-hardcore. They utilize some emo elements, they utilize a teeny bit of metalcore elements, but it's mostly just post-hardcore. Bullet for My Valentine is another one of these bands that get lumped under Screamo. They're not. Bullet for My Valentine is metalcore with, once again, a little bit of elements of emo or clean singing. They have a lot of kind of also heavy metal elements in there, because some of the solos are really, really heavy metal style, like classic heavy metal style. But I think they use a little bit more of an aggressive tone. I don't think I've heard breakdowns, and if there are like a little bit in Bullet for My Valentine, then it's used sparingly, maybe in their earlier stuff. I need to go back and listen to them to really make sure. But yeah, they're not Screamo. Do not blanket term these guys with that. The next two are pretty much the same band, minus Ronnie Radke kind of leaving. I'm talking about Escape the Fate and Falling in Reverse. Escape the Fate are post-hardcore and metalcore, with the very, very odd emo element to it. Falling in Reverse has actually kind of recently, in the last album and a half or two albums, kind of used some slight nu metal elements, and kind of like pop metalcore elements, I guess you could say. But yeah, there's a lot of solos in there that are very traditional, classic heavy metal kind of solos. They try to, in some of these videos, look like Guns N' Roses members, so you can see sort of the influences they got going on here. But do not call these guys Screamo. Do yourself some, a little bit of a favor here. Research these bands. I know it's easy to just go, oh, it's Screamo, because it's like emo with screaming, but it's not. It's a lot more specific than that. And as music listeners and even some music artists have labeled these guys this, and it's a little bit shamefully lazy. Like, you should know what you're listening to. You should know what guitar riffs or drum beats or vocals pertain to certain genres and where they get these influences. This handful of bands here is just a little bit of an example. There's probably like 50 or 60 different bands that get blanketed with the term Screamo, even stuff that isn't even in like metalcore or post-hardcore or stuff like that. I've heard that certain deathcore bands get labeled as Screamo, and that's even more insulting. Like, I'm maybe not the hugest fan of deathcore, but honestly, calling it Screamo is just like a slap in the face. So, knock that shit off. Screamo isn't a real music genre. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's tackle the real issue here. Groove metal. Because everyone knows Screamo is kind of a joke. It's a joke blanket term, and everyone knows it's idiotic. This is the one that's going to really ruffle some jimmies. Or rustle some jimmies, rather. Ruffle some feathers, rustle some jimmies. I don't give a fuck. I know people are going to be butthurt over this. This is called Unpopular Metal Opinions for a reason. If you're going to hate spam me in the comments for this, then just go to another video. If you're going to discuss this in the comments, please keep it civil. Use, logical arguments against this, and have a conversation. Otherwise, I have no use for you, and I'm probably not going to respond, because I don't feed the trolls. I'm not a jackass whisperer. Groove metal, since it was brought up by Banger TV, and they're kind of pushing that this is an actual genre, it is now going to be tackled. Okay, so once again, I've grabbed a handful of these bands that I've kind of looked up and kind of seen that fall under this blanketed umbrella term, and I've also watched the Banger TV episode about 2 or 3 times through, and this is what I've landed with. Pantera seems to be the kind of big staple on what is labeled groove metal, and once again, groove metal is, it's ridiculous. You can call something groovy or say there's a groove to it, but it's just an adjective to describe what you're hearing. It is not the genre title. Pantera, once they got out of their glam stage, became this kind of southern heavy metal with kind of slower thrash elements, and that's basically what I'd call them, southern heavy metal. I realize in a past video, and a lot of trolls like to ding me on this and call me a poser because of it, and somehow I never owned any Pantera albums, which I actually owned all of their albums. I just grew out of it. It's not my thing anymore. I sold it. And the thing they like to ding me on is that in one of my past Unpopular Metal Opinions videos, I called them death metal. It was a mistake. It was a slip of the tongue. I did it on the spot. I know they're not death metal. Thank you. They are southern heavy metal with thrash elements, slower thrash elements. The solos are very telling, especially on Cowboys for Hell, and some of the ones in Vulgar Display of Power, which those are probably their best albums. And if I was ever to re-buy another Pantera album, it would be Cowboys from Hell. But no, Pantera are not groove metal. They are southern heavy metal with slow thrash metal elements, okay? Next, Five Finger Death Punch. They were kind of thrown off to the side on the Banger TV episode. However, I do see these guys get blanketed with this term as well, and the wife really actually enjoys Five Finger Death Punch. We did go see the show a while back, and it wasn't bad. I see Five Finger Death Punch as kind of like an alternate universe version of Stone Sour, maybe a little heavier. But these guys are not groove metal. Okay, Five Finger Death Punch is alternate metal or alternative metal mixed with a little bit of nu metal, and they even have elements of kind of slower thrash in there. Some of the solos are a little telling. Ivan Moody's vocals are kind of like hardcore mixed with thrash vocals, so you can kind of see that influence there, but they are definitely not groove metal. Next up, Lamb of God. They were definitely thrown on the Banger TV list, and they're not groove metal. Okay, they started out as Burn the Priest, which was just an interesting version of death metal, very heavy, very fast, very intense kind of stuff. The vocals are a lot more intense. They had this one song on there that I can't remember the name of. It was really, really good. It had a slower groove to it. It was groovy, but it was not groove metal. And it was just that one song. Now, after that, they kind of became like this hybrid of metalcore and kind of thrashing death. It's definitely a complicated band to really pinpoint a genre on, depending on what album, depending on what song, but they used elements of metalcore, they used elements of thrash, they used elements of death. Randy Blythe's vocals are fairly unique. That his vocals are kind of like metalcore meets thrash meets post-hardcore. He has a very unique voice. I haven't heard too many bands at all sound like him. But yeah, Lamb of God is not groove metal. Sepultura. This was another one that I saw up there, along with Soulfly. Sepultura has had, once again, many different genres in their discography. Their early stuff was kind of somewhat black metal or first wave black metal, and then as they went on, like stuff like Arise, which I had at one point. I don't know what happened to that. I think I may have sold it, which was stupid because Arise is a great album. That was death metal, just old school death metal, and then as they went on, it became kind of like this alternative death thrashy type of thing, maybe slight elements of nu metal thrown in there. Soulfly was kind of more so towards nu metal, so yeah, not groove metal. Devil Driver. Devil Driver, I could see a little bit why people would want to throw them under this blanket, but they're, when I think of Devil Driver, I think of just post Coal Chamber. It's not quite industrial metal. It's it's not quite nu metal, but it's got a teeny little bit of elements of that. Devil Driver has a mix of melodic death metal with some nu metal elements in there. Des Fafara's vocals are kind of like once again like a mix between thrashy, hardcore, and I don't know. He just has some very unique vocals. I gotta give him that. Like it's hard to pinpoint when it comes to his vocals, but it's a mix of nu metal, thrash, and hardcore. But yeah, they're mostly just melodic death mixed with elements of nu metal and maybe slight elements of thrash, but not groove metal. Sorry. And then the last one here, I don't know why these guys get blanketed as groove metal, because they're definitely not. And you could easily put them into something else. Now I'm talking about Fear Factory. Fear Factory, it just always to me has been industrial metal or industrial kind of death metal, but they've added elements of nu metal and they've added slight elements of thrash here and there as well. Yeah, it takes a little bit of looking into it and kind of thinking about what you're hearing. You gotta listen to what the guitar is doing. You gotta listen to what the drum beats are kind of doing. You gotta listen to what the vocals are doing and what style they come from, and then you'll land on what you're actually hearing. And to just blanket these bands as groove metal is lazy, and they're blanket terms. It's a cheap way of being able to get out of actually looking or listening at, or looking at what you're listening to. oddly enough. But yes. So, Banger TV kind of, I feel, did a disservice to us metalheads, or any young metalheads growing up, by labeling this as groove metal. I see that Wikipedia is also jumping on the groove metal train, and it just bugs me. It just feels like laziness. It feels like people don't know what to call things, so they just try to jump to something that's easy and quick. So, anyways, let me know. Let me know what your thoughts on, these blanket terms are. Let me know if you think Screamo should be a legit music genre, or let me know if you think groove metal is a legit music genre, or if you agree with me that it's stupid to label entire bunch of bands under this kind of umbrella term that really should just be an adjective to be used to describe the music, not to put in a genre, or make its own genre. It's like, it sounds like sludge metal, but it also sounds like thrash. But we can't call it thrash or sludge metal, so let's call it groove. So yeah. Thanks for watching. I hope this has kind of been an exploratory, mind-opening kind of video for you. If I've pissed you off by anything what I've said in this video, let me know in the comment section. Let me know whether you agree or disagree. Hopefully this rustles some jimmies and gets some gets the hamsters running a bit upstairs, if you know what I mean, and generates some talk and generates some chat in the comment section below. For glory, for the rebellion, Slimerella out.